force, I could spend 20 minutes giving you a detailed bio of Richard Leider, but we're not going to do that. So in true what's next fashion, I'm going to put Richard in a spot in a minute. But just to say, Richard, first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to join us this morning. I know it was at short notice. Last time we met in November, we shortchanged you by giving you 20 minutes. Today, you have a whole hour. And rather than saying how many books you've written and how accomplished you are as a human being, I'm going to ask you the what's next question. If it was, and which will tell us more, other than the fact that for 30 years, Richard has been leading walking tours in the wilderness of East Africa, which for me is very interesting. But if you were stuck in an elevator for 30 seconds, who would you like to be with, and what would the conversation feel like? Will give us a flavor of what Richard Leider is all about. Over to you, Richard.
Well, that's, first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate this morning. The future belongs to the learners, not the knowers. And I may know something, or not, but I approached this morning as a learner and as a listener. And the person in the elevator would be Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. I spent a week with him in 1968, and it changed my life forever. So hopefully all of us have what I call fortuitous encounters in elevators with people that change our lives. Whether it's in an elevator or not is irrelevant. But so he after, if I'm sure many of you or most of you or all of you know, Viktor Frankl he died a number of years back, but he was in a series of Nazi concentration camps, and originally he was a student of Freud, and then with Adler and Jung and others became part of the European existential brain trust at the time. And anyway, he said this. He said, in spite of it all, whatever's going on in your life today, in spite of it all, say yes to life. And so he taught me to say yes to life, and not to ask the question, what is my purpose? Ask this, what is life asking of me now, right now, in this moment? And so those two pearls have stuck with me and have changed my life fortuitously forever. So that's my answer, Mebs, to the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Very profound. And over to you to guide us through some thoughts on living a life of purpose.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that it was fascinating. I was with Dorothy, Sonny, Jan, and Peter, and you could call it the ultimate dinner party. When a little while back, I was backstage with Richard Saul Warman. Richard Saul Warman is the founder of TED, the TED Talks. He's the founder of TED in the 80s. And why did he found TED? Or how did TED get started? Well, he's kind of a very interesting guy. He's got a background as an architect, as a thinker, and a lot of different things. And he wanted to create the ultimate dinner party of technology. He envisioned, like, what's next, I believe is envisioning. What's the intersection between, or the connectivity between technology, entertainment, and design? And he said, I want to create the ultimate dinner party, and I'm going to invite these smart people, like 6 of them, not 20 of them. And we're going to talk about this question. And the question was, what is the intersection in the future? And out of that ultimate dinner party, TED was created. And now billions, not millions, of people watch TED Talks every year. And why? Because they're curious. So what's next is about, what are you curious about? So, when I was backstage, he said, "Richard, what are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Purpose." And he kind of shrugged me off. He's in his late 80s. I'm in my late 70s. And I said, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" And he said, "Curiosity." He said, "Don't you think that curiosity is kind of the coin of the realm in really bringing out the care, as you talked about, Rick and others, about character and about what people care about and their relevance and things like this? What are you curious about? And why would people be curious about you?" And so I think curiosity is in many ways the elixir here, or the catalyst for what we're talking about. So this has been and should be a conversation. So let me share with you, by Peter and Mebs's request, 4 talking points, or 4 points as a catalyst to open it up to your quest or your questions. So 4 talking points that I want to share with you today. Point number one is the longevity revolution. Spoiler alert, you're getting older. You're getting older. The key is that, are you growing older? I have a book out. I've been on a book tour now. I've done 70 to 75 interviews, all about what does it mean to grow old, not get old, because you're getting old, that's not a choice. Growing old is a choice. And I think that's what this morning right now is about. And certainly aging is not a disease, it's a privilege. And you grow up twice. When you look at first, it's from adolescence to adulthood. And the second time we grow up and have a choice that what matters is going from adulthood to elderhood. And it's not necessarily age specific, but it's wisdom specific in a lot of ways. So the old narrative was to grow up and grow old and die. The new phase that I've been studying now for 4 decades, and with finances from AARP and other institutions, is the new narrative. And the new narrative is that we've added 3 decades to life. In 1900, now I know we're from all over the world here, but in North America, in 1900, or in the early 1900s, we lived to age 47. Now, the fastest growing cohort in North America, including Canada and the US, is in the 80s, 85 and over. So what's that all about? What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just do the same trajectory that we did in the past decades? What are the new possibilities? What are the new choices? And so I'll talk a little bit about that. I wrote a book, co-authored a book called Life Reimagined, about this new phase of life. And my co-author, Alan Weber, used to be the editor of the Harvard Business Review. Then he founded Fast Company magazine, which he sold, and he moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's now the second term mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now go figure that out, from being the editor of the Harvard Business Review to the mayor, second term. Spectacular. I mean, he got everybody. And why? Because he is reimagining, like our book that we co-authored, he's reimagining what it could be like to live in Santa Fe and what are the possibilities. So point number one is there is a longevity revolution. You are getting older. And one of the things that I want to point to here is this. I just turned Sunday, and thank you, Mebs, for your birthday wishes. I just turned 78 on Sunday. And one of my mantras is this. It's from the Benedictines: keep death daily before your eyes. Keep death daily. Keep the end in mind so that when you're making choices of who you're hanging out with and what's next, that you keep the reality that you're mortal and before your eyes. So the Benedictine said, keep death daily before your eyes. So that's point number one. Point number two is the purpose movement. You know, with this new phase of life, it's come of age. There are millions and millions of people worldwide who are 50 and over. And I don't know what your age is. It's relevant, but not totally relevant to conversation. But the question is this: are you living a default life, looking in the rearview mirror at where you've been? Or are you living a good life, looking through the windshield at what's possible? The windshield is way bigger than the rearview mirror. And so the default life is, you know, what did you want to be when you grew up? And how did that turn out? The good life is who, not what. Who do you want to be now that you've grown up and grown old and are growing older? So I think for me, what's next is about that question, and it needs new, fresh eyes and new, fresh breakthroughs. One of the big breakthroughs has been this. Now, this is going to be challenging to some of you, probably not all of you. The breakthrough is this: how you feel about aging, how you feel about aging will add 7.5 years to your life. Not just diet, exercise, lack of disease, all of these different things. Your mindset, which I call purpose, how you feel about aging affects how you age. So are you looking in the rearview mirror at life and just looking at reflecting on that, or are you looking at the power of a purposeful mindset? So point one, the longevity revolution. Point two, the purpose movement. Point, which I've been part of now for decades. I'm considered a pioneer in the purpose movement. I've written 11 books, 3 bestsellers about purpose, which doesn't make me, well, I'm continuing to be a learner, not a knower. I know things, but I'm learning things all the time in my own life, in my own aging, as well as in experiments like this. And I think the experiment, by the way, were really, when I listened and talked with Mebs and Peter about my willingness to be involved here, it's an experiment in relevance. What people really want in life, particularly midlife and beyond, but throughout life, is to remain relevant. I have a colleague, and his answering machine, which I'm going to adopt myself, says this: when you call him and he's not there, it says, at the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's 2 eternal questions. Who are you and what do you want? So whether you call it a book cover or whether you call it something else, who are you and what do you want now at this phase of life? And what I found is that there are 2 things that people answer to that question: who are you and what do you want? Number one is that they want to belong. They want to be part of a community. And that's defined by all of you. Everybody on this call is an experiment of one. Even though you've been in experiments, every one of us is an experiment of one. We all have our own choice in that matter. The second question is, we want to belong, but we want to matter. Mattering matters to human beings. It's in our DNA to serve. So spoiler alert number 2, you're here to serve. Now, what that means is, and how that's defined, I want to jump into next. So point number 3 is, why purpose? Why is purpose relevant to you? And well, what I've learned now, over years of looking at the science, the spirituality, the psychology, the philosophy of purpose, is this: purpose is not a luxury. If you think, oh, having a purpose is a luxury for the wealthy, the well-educated, the North Americans, or you're wrong. Purpose is fundamental, and it's universal, and it's age agnostic. All three of those are very, write that down. Number one, purpose is fundamental. Number two, it's fundamental to health, to healing, to happiness, and ultimately even to longevity. It's no joke. This is not something that psychologists thought up to sell books. And number two, it's universal. I've been privileged from my standpoint to travel the world and with purpose. And I found as many purposeful people in the bush in Africa, as Mebs mentioned, who are living with no means, but sharing everything, to be as purposeful and as conscious about purpose as people at the Harvard School of Business about why purpose matters. And third, it's age agnostic. I did a PBS public in the US, PBS public broadcasting system show, and it took a year to put it together and to film it. It's been shown in over 400 cities across the US. It's still being shown today. And when I went out to part of the PBS gig is that if a particular city raises enough funds, you go out, I would go out and do a workshop. And I would do these workshops in these 6 cities across the country. And let's say a real conservative city like Indianapolis, Indiana. I showed up and I looked at this audience, and there were whole families sitting there staring at me. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Well, we're all going through a what's next moment in our lives. The grandparents, the parents, the kids, and even the grandkids, we're looking at what's next in their lives. This is part of what's going on today in the world. We are at an inflection point, a what's next moment, and we have choices. And as Viktor Frankl taught me, and we have choices in spite of the adversity that we may be facing, be it economic or health or relational or career, whatever they are. So purpose is fundamental, it's universal, and it's age agnostic. And the surprising science is, in case you're a skeptic, if you look at the science of purpose, you will find that I taught recently with a woman who, Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for medicine a few years back. Nobel Prize medicine. She wins it for what she calls the telomere effect. Everybody on this call has telomeres, which means at the end of your, different parts of your body, you have these little things that are called telomeres. And every one of those telomeres, if it shrinks, you get sick and you don't age well. If it stays certain or steady or grows, you actually age longer and you're healthier. And she found that purpose, along with other things, not just purpose, were essential to telomere growth. And she won the Nobel Prize for that. So science and faith agree. Science and faith agree that purpose is fundamental. I spent a year, I went to the seminary for a year. I went to a very universal seminary called United Theological Seminary, and to study purpose and world religions, because I really wanted to be knowledgeable, not on just the science and the psychology, but the spirituality. And every major religion talks about purpose, maybe a different language, maybe different practices, but as part of their traditions. So surprising science, yes. Science and faith agree. So, spoiler alert number 3 is this. You're here not only to serve, but to grow and give. And when I talked with Mebs and Peter, I said, this is my point of view. If you had to boil it down into my legacy and my own life and what I've taught others, it's to grow and give. That's it. That's the bottom line. Are you growing and are you giving? If not, you're not living purposefully, which is what Mebs and Peter asked me to talk about. So having a purpose is not the point. Living purposefully is the point. And to grow and give is the mantra or and so this is the purpose is a verb. Purpose is a verb. It's an action that we do on a day-to-day basis when we get up in the morning. Action precedes clarity. That was a big insight for me. Action precedes clarity. Being in these experiments, I'm sure, added to your own clarity. So living purposefully is fundamental to having a meaningful life. Living purposely, the actions are fundamental to having a meaningful life. So I've talked about 3 points. Point 1, the longevity revolution. Point 2, the purpose movement. What's going on out there? And with the purpose movement, by the way, you find it in schools today. You find it in business. You find it in medicine. I'm involved in everything from the Mayo Clinic to the Whole Health Institute and many other places where purpose is central to integrative health. When you look at holistic or integrative health, purpose or the mindset of purpose is fundamental, not, as I said, a luxury. Why purpose? It's fundamental. So point number 4, before turning it over to you, choosing to live purposefully. I already mentioned the elevator talk with Viktor Frankl, but finding our purpose can feel, maybe even to you right now, kind of out of reach, a little bit big, a little bit, not quite ready yet. Well, get over it. Because when I talk about purpose, I talk about it with purpose with a big P and purpose with a little p. A purpose with a big P is kind of like, oh, I have to have a cause. I have to have a foundation. I have to have a big deal that I'm involved with because that'll be my legacy. Purpose with a small p is what you do every single day of your life when you wake up in the morning. It's the action that, as I said, precedes clarity. My big P purpose is to help you and me and others unlock the power of purpose. Purpose is not out there waiting to be discovered. It's in here waiting to be unlocked and acted upon. And that is an act of courage and curiosity and choice. Choice, curiosity, courage are required to act on purpose on a day-to-day basis. My little p purpose is to make a difference in one person's life every single day. So I'm going to talk about an end here with my part with a couple of practices. My big P purpose, again, what's yours? Mine is to help others unlock the power of purpose. That mindset that goes with that. My little p purpose, make a difference in one person's life every single day. And I look for little p, there are 1,440 purpose moments in a day. Write that down, 1,440. What that means is if you're sleeping, it's less than that. But you have plenty of time, like Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps, when he was there, got up with the will to live every day, but also to give somebody else a kind word, a crust of bread, a hug, hope, a slurp of soup, one little thing. And he said people who did that weren't guaranteed that they'd live, but there was a guarantee that there was a possibility that they might survive. So what about you? what's your big P purpose? What's your little p purpose on a day-to-day basis? And so, we all know narcissists who are all about themselves. Purpose is universally always about giving, grow and give. It's about giving to others. And so this point 4, choosing to live purposefully, there are 3 steps to unlocking your purpose. Here's the formula. G plus P plus V equals P. Gifts plus passions plus values equals purpose, or equals calling. Your calling in life, to say yes to life and to, So the G is gifts. Gifts. How do you want to serve? How do you want to help? Your gifts are those things that some of which you were born with, some of which you acquired, but gifts are things that you have. There are 4 characteristics of a gift. Number 1, so a gift is like a talent, okay? So I created a tool, which you can get on Amazon or other places, called calling cards. And it sells all over the world, and it helps you to discern your gifts. Because so many people say, oh, I'm not gifted. I'm not the world's greatest piano player or the greatest anything. Every one of you has gifts. And part of your reason for being here is to use those gifts in the service of others. And so a gift has 4 characteristics. Number 1, it's something you love to do. Think of a gift, something you really love to do. Secondly, others observing you, loving to do it, and doing it probably pretty effortlessly and superbly. 3, a gift is something you can't recall learning. I don't know. One of my gifts is deep listening. Of course, I'm paid as a coach. I'm paid as somebody who does that. But the point is, I've been doing this since I was a kid. And deep listening is when I'm on, and I'm not always on, by the way. When I'm on, I listen to what's not being said. I listen to the nuances of what is in the conversation, not just the words. And I have a ability to do that has been with me since I was a kid. What about you? What is it that you love to do? Others observe you loving to do it. And the third thing, you can't recall learning it. I never had a course in listening. Of course, I went back to school in psychology and counseling psychology, et cetera, but that was way later. And to refine my gifts, so to speak. And the 4th thing is, I love being around other listeners, other people who have mastered their craft in certain ways that I can learn from. So what about you? What is it that are your gifts? Secondly, passions. What do you care about? As Richard Saul Wurman with the TED Talk said, what are you curious about? What would your ultimate dinner party be about? What would the questions you'd be asking? What do you want to use your gifts in the service of? That's what we call passions, the P. But if you don't like the word passion, if that's too big of a word for you, or too squishy or too soft, the key word here is curiosity. What are you really curious about? What do you want to learn more about? What would you like to use your gifts in the service of at this stage of your life? And are you doing that in many ways? What would create relevance for you? How would you be relevant? And then the V, values. So gifts, G, plus passions, P, plus values, V, equals calling, or equals purpose. So the values basically are, where do you want to, so the gifts are, what do you want to do or how do you want to help? The passions, the P is, who do you want to help, or what kind, and the values, where do you want to help? So often people are looking for community because they want to use their gifts and passions in places that matter to them or where they care about it, not just any place. If you're still working, like I am, at 78, I'm still engaged full-time, but I'm working on my own now. And I have my own gig, so to speak. But the most toxic breakdown for many people is where they work. It's not what they're doing. They may love their job, but they don't love their boss, their supervisor, their community, their team, etc., or even physically where they work. So the V is the values, but it's really about a voice. It's where you have your voice and where you're heard and where you feel like you matter, and etc. So are you using your gifts on things you feel passionate about in environments where you feel like you matter? So two practices that I want to leave you with here under this fourth point. Practice number one is find meaning in the morning. Find meaning in the morning. When you first get up in the morning, don't reach for your cell phone. Don't reach for, after you relieve yourself or whatever you need to do to be comfortable, ask yourself, the purpose practice that I practice and teach every morning is this. First of all, pause. In other words, no electronics. Secondly, take 3 deep breaths. Do a centering practice, 3 deep breaths. Third, ask yourself, how am I going to make a difference to one person today? Got it? Find meaning in the morning. Your intention, set your mental model, your mental practice, your intention to make a difference in someone's life today. Pause means no electronics. Secondly, step 2, breathe. Center yourself. 3 deep breaths is a centering practice. And third, ask yourself, how am I going to show up today? How am I going to matter in one person's life? And so that's finding meaning in the morning. You could also, by the way, I have a second thing, which is a little stiff for a lot of people, but I have what I call golden hour every morning. I couldn't find my Zoom link this morning because I was during golden hour. Golden hour is where I turn off all electronic devices. I read and pray and meditate and reflect during that golden hour. When is your golden hour? It doesn't have to be in the morning, but put yourself on your calendar. When I ask people, how are you doing? Almost always everyone says, oh, I'm busy. I said, well, you're tired. Oh, I'm busier now than I was before I was retired. I said, well, what are you busy about? Because ants are busy, you know, we're all busy. What are you busy about? Are you filling time or are you finding fulfilling time? What creates fulfilling time for you? Because busyness is not going to get you the joy or the what's next moment that you're after. So first practice is in how to grow and give is grow. And the grow is to wake up every day with an intention to do that. And golden hour is one way to do that, etc. Second, how to give. And that is, I already mentioned there are 1,440 purpose moments in a day. And all it takes is 1 minute, 1 moment to make life, you know, relevant for us. So one way to do that is to take a Post-it out now. When you're done, when we're done right now, take a Post-it and write down grow and give on that Post-it. And put that Post-it on your mirror. Mm-hmm. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, you ask yourself, how am I going to grow and give today? And at the end of the day, before you go to bed at night, look at that mirror. There you go, Dorothy, thank you. When you end at the end of the day, ask yourself, how did I grow and give today? And so the what's next possibility is really about holding yourself accountable. You could have a purpose partner. And maybe that's one of the reasons for this community is to not just be in small groups or a network, but to find a purpose partner. A purpose partner is somebody who we can really be transparent with, who we can talk with about what really matters without them fixing us. A purpose partner practices care. versus cure. They're not there to fix you. They're there to care enough about your story, your book cover, that kind of thing. And they listen. They listen deeply. Who is your purpose partner, or who could be your purpose partner? So the second practice, the first one is to find meaning in the morning. Second is the post-it exercise, and to serve and look for those purpose moments in a day. And what I find personally with those purpose moments is a felt sense of living purposefully. It's not just having a purpose, that's noble, but a felt sense, it feels better. It feels more healthy to serve, to give in those purpose moments. So as Viktor Frankl said, say yes to life. And in spite of everything, ask, what is life asking me today, this morning? And Frankl used to quote the poet Tagore, who said this: I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. So I'll end with that. And Mebs and Peter, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And I'll turn it back to you to see what wants to happen next. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Richard. And every time you talk, I pick up 3 more nuggets. I can only remember 3 things at a time. So, but you gave us almost 333 things to think about. One that sticks in my mind always is, the small p and the big P. We tend to think as individuals that unless we can solve the climate crisis in the world, there's no purpose for us to be part of. And as you've always said, that's not true at all. So thank you so much again for joining and sharing your wisdom as you always do. And I know for sure that the group here has taken away a lot of gems with them. And we are recording this, so we'll share the recording with all of you. I always find that on my walks through the park, I listen to Richard's messages, and they just resonate. So thank you so much. I'm sure there's a ton of questions, so I'm not going to say any more. But Rick, will you help us moderate the questions?
By all means. And Richard, thanks so much from me as well. What an exciting and yet grounded story you just shared with us. Let's continue to use the chat stream. If you have a question, please do put it into the chat, and that will help us keep the conversation moving. And while we wait for your questions, Richard, I'll ask a question. One of the many things that struck me about your talk was the clarity. And maybe this was clear to you from long ago, but I can imagine that it took you a while to find the clarity. Is there anything that you can share with us about finding clarity?
Well, I've had, as I mentioned, fortuitous encounters, and it didn't start, but way back when with people like Frankl. I met Abraham Maslow the year before he died, and many people on this call probably know the Maslow hierarchy of needs, et cetera. And many people think that the Maslow hierarchy ends with self-actualization, with self. The year before he died, he and Frankl were at loggerheads with each other. And the year before he died, he agreed with Frankl that the top of the Maslow hierarchy is transcendence. It's serving. It's not about self-actualization. It's self-actualization for the point of giving or serving others. And so I've had, I can mention many others that I've had. I'll call them my teachers, but I call them, at the time, they weren't my teachers. They were fortuitous encounters. So it'd be interesting for you all to reflect on, who are your teachers? Who have your, and the second question though, Rick, is, depends on your age and stage and a lot of other things, but who would consider you to be a fortuitous encounter? because of the questions you ask, because of the listening that you provide, etc. We all have the capabilities throughout our lives to be those for others. When I ask young people about who's on their sounding board, almost never are their parents. Why? Because the parents are about fixing you, not about just listening to you. And I think that listening is the magic in what's next.
Listening, boy, that's a provocative statement. Listening is the magic in what's next.
Yeah.
Say on, please.
Well, you know, when we go through, as we talked about in our small group, or I listened and they talk, is that we're going through and we'll continue to go through life transitions. You know, it's just what happens. Change is what life's about. However, when in life transitions, we tend, depending on the drama or the depth, we tend to go higher and we tend to go deeper, Rick. When we go higher, we look at, well, what's going on out there and what should I be doing about that? When we go deeper, we look at what really matters, and what we're confronted with are the constants. What doesn't change? What stays steady? And that's where purpose, values, things I'm talking about here. What are the constants in your life that don't change, that are just the soul of what you are about in life? And for me, I learned in the thread through my work, and it's, you know, it's gone zigzag, it's not been a straight line, is that mattering matters. I've interviewed people now over the age of 65 for almost 50 years. Figure it out. In my 20s, I started to interview people over the age, because my dad died when he retired, shortly after he died. And he had enough money and he had enough health, et cetera, I thought, and he died. And I thought, well, and I started to look at the research on what they call executive death syndrome, and saw why do so many people die when they retire? And I started to do some research on that, and I started to do my own research, and I was part of the Harvard study of adult development at the time, and then I did my own research, and they said, Rick, what if you're to live your life over again? What would you advise to me or to others? And three things came out. Number one, they'd be more reflective. Number two, they would take more risks. Number three, they would understand that mattering matters, that being relevant is not a luxury. I learned that early on, and then I've started to put the science and the other stuff to that over time.
Thank you. A question from Dorothy. It's something that she recently read, and would love your perspective on this. I read recently that we should surround ourselves with people who awe us and inspire us, not people who admire us. We should surround ourselves with people who awe us and inspire us, not people who admire us.
Dorothy, it's a great question. I don't know exactly how to answer that because it's kind of loaded, that word awe. But I know this, that in my own practice, in my own world, is that isolation is fatal. Going it alone is an incredibly bad idea at any age, but particularly as we age. And so if isolation is fatal, it's not just loneliness. Being alone is fine. Alone is good. But loneliness, you know, what is it that fills that void for us? And it's not just having busyness or more people in our lives. It's having people who we are willing to be transparent and connected to at a deeper level. So whether you call that awe or inspiring, who are the people that get you, that really get Dorothy, and get the fact that you're confused or you're not clear, or, well, just do this like I did that? Forget them. They listen and bring out your your story, your book cover.
Help me understand matter. Somebody asks DM. I'm sorry, I don't know what DM stands for, so forgive me, I can't attribute you, my apologies. The question is, help me understand mattering matters.
We're here to use our gifts to serve others. The bottom line is to serve. Now, you may have a different point of view about why you're here. What's the point of the exercise? What are you doing on earth? Why are you here? That's the power of purpose. So my answer to that question is you're here to serve. So mattering matters means that that you're serving in some way. It may be that purpose moment of the 1440 moments today, but ultimately at the end of your life, I'm often asked to do, and I just did one a couple of weeks ago, a homily or a talk at a funeral. And when you look at an obituary, all of a sudden you get what what David Brooks calls the resume virtues. Here's Richard Leider, and he did this, this, and this, and wrote this many books, and had this many. But then you get into the beyond the resume virtues, you get to the legacy virtues. Like, who was this guy? How did he matter in my life? What did I, what I want to share with him is I loved him because of blank, or I esteemed him because of blank. And so for each of you, you've got resume virtues, you've done stuff, but that doesn't matter in the end. What matters is how you cared for others and how you mattered in their lives in certain ways.
And by the way, I've learned to decode. It was Dr. Anzaya who asked that question. Thank you so much, Edith.
Yes, it was my question. Because I came when you were going on, so I wanted to understand, thought it had been covered earlier. But thank you, excellent explanation, I appreciate it.
Where are you from?
I'm from Kenya. I'm in Nairobi right now.
Safi sana.
Karibu.
Yeah. I've been going to Tanzania and Kenya, but Tanzania for 35 years, every year, except during pandemic. I haven't gone now, but I'm, and so I sat around the fire with elders in Tanzania from many tribes. And one of the tribes I sat around the fire with inspired me to write one of my books. And one of my books is called Claiming Your Place at the Fire. Claiming Your Place at the Fire, one of my books. And what I noticed was in Kenya and Tanzania, tell me if you think this is true. This was my experience, however, it's true for me, is this: the wisest of the elders sat the closest to the fire. And it wasn't because it was warm. It was because they wanted to hear their stories. They wanted to hear their wisdom. And so I was sitting around one night in the bush in Tanzania near Ngorongoro crater. And I was sitting there and I was wondering, well, where would my place be at the fire? Would I be sitting close to the fire or away from the fire if in my community, in my world? And so I wrote a whole book about claiming your place at the fire as a wise elder. What does that mean? And so I've got deep, deep passion for East Africa and for the people of East Africa. I went there in 1983 to climb Kilimanjaro, which I've done 8 times. And I've taken 100 people to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. I went there because I wanted to raise money for a school called Outward Bound, which is it's in Lotokotok. You know where that is on the slope in Kenya. And
Yes,
I climbed Kilimanjaro, and it was a dramatic experience. And I saw the animals, but I fell in love with the people. So I fell in love with East African people and have gone back every year, except for the pandemic since. So I just had to share that.
Thank you for sharing. Yes. I actually went to Mount Kenya through Outward Bound 42 years ago and climbed to Point Lenana.
Kweli.
And then this year I climbed Mount Kenya to raise funds for life in abundance. And then I went to Stella Point this year in March, Kilimanjaro.
Safi sana, safi sana. I think it's fantastic. And my Swahili is fair, but not great like yours. So, but yeah, I always wanted to climb Kenya, but I haven't done it yet. So good for you. Thank you. Sante sana.
Thank you.
And we have a comment from Dan. Thank you so much, Mbite. We have a comment from Dan Doherty. Serving others can be uncomfortable. The more I serve others, I start to understand that we need those with life purpose in the room with me. Elder Casey Eaglespeaker impacted my vision of service when he stated, "It is time to stop doing for, stop doing to, and begin doing with."
Yeah. What can I say? I agree. I mean, it's a very beautiful summary. And serving can be like, oh, I have to do this. But the point is, Rick, this: if you're using the gifts you love on things you care about in environments, then and finding that is what's next is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not serving so that you have to do this and it's an obligatory thing. If it's that, forget it. But search for and discover what is it that matters to you. Using your love, your most enjoyed gifts, there's that felt sense. There's an energy there. It doesn't drain you. Look at what drains you and what energizes you, and it's that formula energizes you.
Thank you, and my thanks to Mebs for excuse me. Thank you, Nita, for drawing to my attention that Janice has asked a really interesting question. Janice's question is, you mentioned living a default life versus living a good life. What if someone never followed their childhood dreams? Would you encourage them to go back to those dreams?
I'm not sure. I mean, as a coach, I don't give advice. I mean, I would need to learn more about that and what's up for that person. But I would relook at them for sure. I mean, it's never too late to have a happy life. And so looking at in the rearview mirror at those things, and that never, I find so many people today, Rick, who say, I'll just use an example. I was an artist and I loved art, but my parents said, you can't make a living with art, so go to law school. So I went to law school. I didn't, but this example, and it was okay. I made a living, but you know what? I'm still an artist. So what do I do now? I'm 50 and I want to, well, I don't know. I mean, that's what neXT is about, is to help people to dig into that question and do some exploration. Life Reimagined. I created the Life Reimagined Institute for AARP, where millions of people were on it. And they always wanted to explore. They wanted to go back and explore the possibilities. And so there's 6 steps in Life Reimagined. Reflect and look at that question, connect, talk to somebody else about that, explore, choose to make some kind of move, repack, meaning, well, yeah, that's great, but I have a mortgage and I have kids. Look at what you need to let go of, and then act, make some choices. And so there are practices to do this, but it's not easy because we're all an experiment of one.
You got me thinking about elders who inspire, and a very unusual situation came to mind, and I'd be curious to know if elders have inspired you in unusual ways. My situation was sitting in a fast food restaurant in Tokyo, out in one of the suburbs of Tokyo, actually, not way out in the suburbs, but in the suburb of Tokyo. And the man was cooking at a deep fat fryer. He must have been 75. He looked like he was completely blissful. He looked like there was nothing in the world that could have made him happier than spending hours of the day in this deep fat, in front of a deep fat fryer in a fast food restaurant. This was a decade ago, and I think of it often. Have you had some unusual encounters with elders that you reflect on?
Many. I've made a livelihood out of this, as I mentioned, and writing about it in my books as well with these. But back to Dr. Nzea, sitting around the fire in Tanzania, an elder from a tribe called the Hadza, Hadza. The last, they say, of the original people. They've been around for 100,000 years as hunter-gatherers. So I'm sitting with a hunter-gatherer. He says, he was tired of me interviewing him. And he says, can we step aside? And he says, we step outside, and he says, Richard, you know what the two most important days in your life are? And I said, yeah, of course, birth and death. And he looked at me like, I thought you wrote all these books and did all these things. And we're talking through a translator. I can talk to him in Swahili, but I can't through the Khoisan and click language of the hunter-gatherers. And he said the two most important days in our life and how we've survived for all these years are these. Number one is birth and, getting past infant mortality. And the second thing is deciding why you were born. Because the only reason that we've survived all these years is through a sharing culture. And that's what I love about East Africa, as the sharing and the not having much and giving everything. And so I learned, here I am studying all this and, getting degrees in it and everything. And an elder in his 80s, who's a part of a hunter-gatherer tribe, is teaching me that, the last of the human freedoms is to choose why you're here.
And Richard, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us today. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Meps.
Terrific. Thank you so much again, Rick, for moderating the session today. And Richard, as always, a tremendous pleasure to be with you, around you, and listening to your thoughts. To the rest of the team, thank you again for joining us today. And in a true grow and give style, Richard has offered us another hour or so of his time to come back and see how we are engaging in purposeful life. And what we're going to do as soon as we get off is we're going to send you a link to his latest book of Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old. It's a PDF file, and you'll have the link open till the end of August. But of course, do download it and read it before then. And the only condition that Richard has made is that when we come back in a month or so, we'll decide on a time and a day. You must have read the book, because the questions that you have and the thoughts that you have and the discussion that we have in a month or so will be so much more richer. And I think Richard would love us to have read the book and come up with questions and thoughts based on that. So is that a fair deal, gang? Terrific. Richard, thank you again. And always a pleasure to see you. We'll be in touch soon. And do stay for the last couple of minutes. To the sprinters and the ILC team that's here today, what more can I say than to thank you once again for your creativity, commitment, engagement, and support of the experiments that we went through. We've learned a ton, and we now have to kind of decompress and see the themes that are coming out of it, which we'll be doing in the coming weeks. We will definitely share the feedback that we've gotten from everybody in a consolidated manner. You are now our newest ambassadors, so do share what you've learned. And this is all part of growing and giving, right, Richard, in terms of what people have learned here.
Hopefully.
And we'll definitely, although the formal experiments end now, I think our connections and our relationship continue. And we'll keep the portal open for all of you. As I said, we'll refine it as we go along, and hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thank you again, and have a wonderful summer if you're in North America. I don't think the rainy seasons have started again, Bithe, in Nairobi yet, but if it is, stay dry.
Yeah, thank you. It's cold.
Thank you so much. All the best,
Okay.
everybody. Take care. Bye-bye now.